Welcome to the Men of Iron podcast, changing a culture one man at a time. At Men of Iron, we equip men and grow godly leaders through creating and sustaining one-to-one and micro-group mentorships. Go to menofiron.org for more info. Thanks for listening. What is up, world? Welcome to the Men of Iron podcast, episode 13. It's Steve and Justin live from Willow Street, PA. J-Dub, what's going on?
It looks like winter outside, huh?
Yeah, we got some fresh snow falling as we record.
Yep.
Yeah, pretty exciting.
And it's probably always just like we were just talking about, a lot of a bigger deal from the weatherman standpoint than it actually will be, because it
seems to be the case often.
It's like, it's snowmageddon. Oh, it's just a little rain.
It's just some slush. Well, episode 23 is brought to you by the One Center for Leadership in Canton, Ohio, multiplying kingdom leaders through catalytic conferences, collaborative workspaces, and customized coaching. Go to onecenter.com for more info. We will actually be out there this weekend. It's pretty exciting.
It's going to be great.
Man, our Ohio launch happening at the One Center. Well, we would love to introduce our special guest for episode 23, Tyler Reagin. Tyler is the president of Catalyst, a leadership development organization that exists to unify and equip leaders who love the church through resources and events. Tyler is a leadership coach, speaker, and author. His latest book is The Lifegiving Leader. He resides in Atlanta, Georgia with his wife and two boys. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I love that it's my latest book. It's my only book, so that worked out too.
It's funny, Justin and I were actually just discussing that before we got on the call with you.
Yeah, it's thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on.
Yeah, man, it's an honor. So just let us know, who is Tyler Reagin?
Yeah, so I am Georgia born and grew up here in Atlanta, and got a wife of 17 years, Carrie, and our two boys are 11 and 8, and so we're just kind of in the full throes of about to start middle school. Literally, my oldest just got spacers in because he's getting braces next week. I'm like, I don't know how this happened. Like, I'm early 40s. I have kids that are getting braces. What? I don't even I remember that in my life. You know what I mean? So it's like this is all weird. So that's the highest priority in my life, and other than my relationship with Jesus. And then I get my vocation. What I get to do is I get to lead an organization called Catalyst. This year is actually our 20-year anniversary, and so it's a pretty cool, pretty cool milestone for people that are in the kind of the space we are, which is like Christian conference and leadership development space. There aren't a ton that really make it that long, so it's kind of neat for us to be able to celebrate that and cast a vision for what the next 20 years looks like. So we really just, our heartbeat is for leaders who love the church and the emerging generation of leaders, and so. We spend our days thinking about how do we raise the next generation of Christian leaders, whether they're in the workforce or in the marketplace or in the church, to lead in a way that really brings glory to God and brings honor to Him by how they take care of people. And so we spend a lot of time doing that. And we've been privileged to partner with folks like Andy Stanley for all 20 years. John Maxwell started Catalyst 20 years ago. So we spend a lot of time. That's what we do, and it's a really fun opportunity. And God's doing some really neat things there.
That's phenomenal. Well, we're going to hit you with take 5 if you're ready for it, Tyler.
I'm ready.
All right. Take 5. Question number 1 is, what is your golf handicap?
Currently, it's a 4.6.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not bad.
We're gonna have to get you on the course with our president, because he's about a 2, I think. Isn't he?
Okay. Yeah, I haven't played about 2 months, so it could be higher than that right now. But.
Well, that's better than Justin. I think, I don't know, I'm probably like a 24. I don't know. What do you, Justin?
I'm off the scale.
Yeah. They run out of handicap for you.
Yeah, he doesn't have one. All right, question number 2 is, who or what inspires you?
Man, my kids inspire me. My wife inspires me. And I know that sounds simple and like you're supposed to say that really is true. And then outside of that, great leadership. There's just something about men and women who take the road less traveled when it comes to leading, and who say, I'm going to do what it takes to be a leader filled with integrity and character, even though that often means the harder decisions, and it often means it takes longer, and it often means you don't get the recognition, and you just, I don't know, I'm inspired by the leaders that just are selfless and willing to put themselves out there and go, it's not about me, it's about other people, and that inspires me like crazy.
That's awesome. Question number 3 for take 5. You talked about celebrating 20 years of Catalyst. What is your favorite Catalyst conference moment?
Ooh. Well, that's a good, gosh, there's too many. That's, we've had some openers that I just love because they set the tone. Honestly, my favorite moment every year is our Thursday night session where we have it's really like a night of worship and a time to pivot from the inspiration of kind of this is what our theme is about to day 2, which is going to be really practical. But this is our pivot to where we talk about your hearts. And I think over the years, we've had Jesus Culture lead. We had Bethel lead at West last year. And then we had Belonging Company lead this year. There's just something in the worship. And then like Robert Madu did a talk at West last year and combine that with Bethel worship. It's a pretty good combination. So we've just had some moments like that where I'm just like, I can't believe I get to do this. And so there's obviously been some crazy moments and some fun performers and different things, but there's something about that moment that's so real and so genuine, so needed for leaders. So that's usually my favorite moment every event.
Awesome. Take 5, question number 4 is, what is your favorite date night spot with your wife?
Oh, well, she would say probably El Felix, which is a little Mexican spot down here close to us.
Okay.
And she loves going there, and then we can walk around that area. There's a lot of good shops and desserts and things we do down there. But we both love to go, if we get a chance, 1 or 2 times a year to sneak away for a day or 2 and go somewhere fun. But that's probably the best. And then she likes to go to Target, so that's a really great date night. But that, again, goes back to our age, right?
Oh,
we get
funny.
to go to Target without the kids? Fantastic.
Sounds like my wife's favorite date spot, too, yeah.
Get a little Starbucks on the way out, maybe.
Uh-huh.
All right, take 5, question number 5, Tyler, is, what's the best book you read in 2018?
In 2018, I really love John Mark Comer's book, God Has a Name. I think it's a fantastic book. I've got so many books, good grief. I'm always bouncing between different things. A friend of ours who's on our board is a young leader named Grant Skeldon, wrote a book called The Passion Generation, where he's talking about, he feels that he's 27. He feels like the millennial generation, what they want more than anything is discipleship. And so it's really
Wow.
compelling book. I really enjoyed that. Gosh, see, get me started on that, and I can give a lot of options. But those 2 good ones. I really like both of those. There's you know how your brain just goes, wow, there's too many to choose from, I guess. But I like those 2 books, and then I'm out. I can't even keep going with it. I feel like I'm just going to stutter.
Awesome. Well, you survived take 5. You did well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we'd love to just kind of hear more about your journey. We obviously talked about you being the president of Catalyst, and just how did you get here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I still ask the Lord that quite often. Or more, what were you thinking, Lord? Like this was part of the decision, huh? Like I said, grew up here in Atlanta, low middle class. My dad's a mechanic my whole life. Mom was kind of just did different jobs, and then went to the University of Georgia. Got saved in high school at a Southern Baptist church, and just as shallow as I am, this will tell you how shallow I am. Is I never had a problem with Jesus. We grew up around the church because you grew up in the South, but I just didn't like a lot of the people that represented him, and so they weren't fun. And I was thinking to myself, I don't have a problem with Jesus, but I know there's a worldview that comes with that means I'm probably not going to get to do some of the things that my friends do. And if it's not fun, why would I want to do that? That sounds like a high schooler, but that's what I was. So, but then I met some people in a youth group, and it just changed everything for me. I started seeing a different abundant life type thing, a joy-filled life. And I thought, now I can do that. I'm in on that. And then I went to the University of Georgia, got really involved at a campus ministry called the Wesley Foundation, and one of the few moments of my life that I just keep looking back going, thank you, Lord, for that season, because we really felt like we watched just a movement of God for 4 or 5 years. When the campus pastor got there, it was pretty straightforward kind of campus ministry. He just started sharing the word and talking about how the Holy Spirit moves in our lives, and he ended up lowering the attendance from 75 to 25, so that's a good growth plan. And then but that 25 was bought into the idea of revival and spiritual awakening on our campus. And University of Georgia is a huge school. And so these students, some of them would lay on the roof of the auditorium and pray over it all night, just that the Lord would show up and do things. And they were just they were bought into the idea that they may never see the fruit of their prayers, but that they were committed to it. And then when I got there were maybe 150 students. And then by the time we all graduated and worked there for a year, we had 1,500 on Wednesday nights.
Wow.
And it was just a move of God. You can't explain. I mean, it was just people paved the way through their prayers and their service, and then God just, and still to this day, 20-something years later, they average 1,500 or so on Wednesday nights, and God's just released a ton of leaders through that. So college was awesome for me. I loved it. You know, I'm a big Georgia football fan, and still in counseling because we can't win the big game, and we have to deal with Alabama on a regular basis. So, you know, that just sends you into a little bit of a faith journey in its own right. But my wife, you know, I love golf. That's always been a part of my life. After high school, grew up playing soccer. So in college, felt called to ministry. I really did. Once I got saved, a lot of people were like, you should go into ministry. And I think it's because I'm a fairly natural leader, but I just was like, no, unless God calls me, I'm good. So I got my technology education degree, and then really felt one night at Wesley where I was, God just laid it. I mean, it was clear as day that he was calling me into a lifelong ministry. And so just kept my degree so that I could finish school, and then was a youth pastor at an Episcopal church. That was a different turn of events for me. And the guy that was the priest there, he came to the school and he said, hey, couple people recommended you. Would you, he said, I'm a charismatic evangelical Episcopal priest. And I was like, I don't know what any of those things mean. Like, I don't have a clue what you're talking about. But I went for 2 years as a youth pastor there, and I loved it. It wasn't, the Anglican movement, the time Episcopalian for us, like, that wasn't for me, but I really am glad I got to experience that for 2 years. And because what I do at Catalyst, we're not a church or denomination. It frees us up to really serve the entire body of Christ. And so my ecumenical background really adds to that. It allows me to see, the different angles and what we got to do. And so then I went to seminary at Gordon Conwell up in Boston, up you guys' way. And I mean, by your way, I mean, just like near there, like 6-7 hours near there. I'm not, you know how it is when you grow up on the East Coast and you think like Seattle and LA are just like down the street. Like they're not. Yeah. Like it's pretty significant flight. So I know you're not that close to Boston, but we loved it. We froze. I don't like cold weather, so that wasn't great. But great degree. I loved it. I loved Gordon Conwell. My wife and I had just been married, and so came back and we're going to start a church with a friend here in Atlanta, and that didn't work out. And so we kind of bounced around. I worked at my best friend's dad's boat shop for a while. So, all those young leaders that listen to this and go, oh man, you just jumped straight to Catalyst, and you guys both have probably a similar story. You're like, no. Let me tell you about the 9 months working at a boat shop going, God, what are you doing? Like, I've been following you. I went to school. I feel like you had these plans, and then this door closed, and now this door, and now look what I'm doing. Is this really what you had planned? And yet every one of those parts of the process helped define you as a leader. And so then I ended up starting a campus with North Point called Athens Church. And that's when I got involved with Andy Stanley in that ministry. And we started a church in Athens at the University of Georgia, and was there for about 15 months, and then moved over to start one of the main campuses at North Point. And that was what I was doing when I got involved with Catalyst. So, I was the service programming director there about 8 years, and then I was producing Catalyst as a contractor. So that was really what I was, like, creative directing and producing events was what I was doing for the church, and then produced Catalyst for a couple of years, and then they brought me over to really do two things: produce the events, be the creative director, but also really develop staff. That's what I love. I love leadership, and I love the church. And so Brad Lomenick, who was my predecessor, he brought me over to do those two things, and then about a year in, I took over for him and been leading it since then.
Wow.
Awesome.
That was a long version. I don't know how long you want it, but that gives you a little bit more detail.
And that's the end of our podcast.
There we go. It's been fun, guys. Enjoy the big, deep snow.
Oh, no, I love it, man. I'd love to just kind of hear your thought on, you mentioned, talking about millennial generation, and you labeled them an emerging generation of leaders. And you even mentioned that book, The Passion Generation. And I think millennials often get, a bad rap in today's society. I'd just love to kind of hear what you've seen in equipping and developing leaders from this generation. Yeah.
It's really interesting. I wrote about this in the book a little bit, and then I've heard Simon Sinek talk about millennials a ton. And, one of the things he said at a Catalyst stage was that millennials, the older generation's going, they're lazy. They don't want to work, this, that, and the other. And obviously there's the word entitlement is a huge word, kind of stereotypical label that's put over the entire generation. And, but he said, I think you're just misunderstood. And he said, I think part of the problem is the people who have enabled you to be entitled are your parents. And so they're the ones leading you now, but they're frustrated with the ones that aren't their kids. And you're like, okay, interesting. We got to figure this out. Here's what I've learned. Most of our team is next generation leaders, with the exception of a few of us old folks. But what I'm finding, and I've always talked about this, I'm Gen X, and so we had basically a generational label that was we don't really care about anything, which is true. Okay, we don't. What the emerging generation and the millennials seem to really care. They're very purpose driven, which is way more purpose driven than Gen X was. And so what I'm seeing is how do we, there's the passage in Proverbs, I forget exactly which proverb, but it says zeal without knowledge it can be deadly. I think what we want to figure out is how do we take passion and purpose, such an ingrained part of the millennial generation, and combine it with wisdom. And that's really what a lot of what I think discipleship and mentoring can bring to the table is love your passion, love your purpose, love the fact that you're fighting against the stereotype of being entitled. I tell all our young leaders all the time, if you want to break a stereotype, you've got to go 2 miles, even if you don't think it's you got to go 2 miles in the opposite direction just to make sure that people realize, wow, you are different than what I thought. And so for me, I think the best, the kryptonite for entitlement is just hard work. Like, be a hard worker, work your tail off. This isn't a pay your dues thing. Like, oh, you got to pay your dues, then you'll get, no, you work your tail off. And honestly, as believers, I don't think we have a choice. Like, it's part of our divine directive that if we are followers of Jesus, the word lazy should never come into our reputation or our perception. So I believe in the next generation as much as anybody. I'm all in and figuring out the nuances of leading them is part of leadership. I mean, baby boomers had to figure us out. We got to figure out the next generation.
Yeah,
that's really good.
Yeah, and it's kind of maybe a foundational question to kind of go back. Define leader. I mean, I think we have a lot of connotations and things when we have that word out there. Tell us your perspective and definition of what is a leader.
Yeah, you just keep it simple. I mean, John Maxwell used to say that leadership is influence. And so the way I describe it is, how do you steward your influence? That's your leadership journey. So whether you're a stay-at-home mom, you're an insurance salesman, you're the pastor of a 2,000-person church, everybody has influence with somebody. And I'll do this when I'm speaking to college students. I'll say, raise your hand if you got influence with one or two other people, and everybody can raise their hand. How you steward that relationship and that influence is your leadership journey. And the trick to that is, so many people want the influence of the bigger group or of the more people or the platform, but they're not willing to take care of the 2 or 3 that's in front of them right now. And that to me, the leadership journey is you take care of the 2 or 3 that's in front of you. The influence you have right now, you watch how quickly that'll become 4 and how quickly that'll become 8 if you steward it really well. So it's a management thing. And I think that kind of demystifies the idea of leadership. Now there are different levels of it. Like, people that are leading massive churches or leading organizations or businesses, there's a different skill set, but they're still doing the same exact thing, which is stewarding the influence they have to the best of their ability. And so I think for young leaders to recognize, man, I do have influence right now. That is my leadership responsibility and journey. And I've got to take care of it if I'm going to be seen or deemed worthy of handling more than that.
So would you say everyone then is a leader in some capacity?
I think everyone has influence and everyone has to steward that well. So yes, I do think though there is a difference in like upfront leadership. I mean, there's all kind of versions of it, but everybody has to recognize that they have a leadership journey that they're responsible for.
That's good. I heard you say in an interview I was watching earlier this week in preparation for this, it was had to do with caring for people, and you said if you don't care for people, you're kind of putting a lid on your capabilities as a leader.
Yeah, that that's true too, right? Have you ever worked for somebody who you knew just wanted you to accomplish something but didn't care about you?
Yep.
Again, I know this is like my second Maxwell quote, which probably most people listening are like, who's that? He's just the godfather of leadership, whatever, y'all, come on. But he always says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I have watched that live out time and time again. I know I'm only in my young 40s, and so those of you in your 60s are going, yeah, young, but I have seen it, and I don't want to work for a leader who doesn't care about me. I don't care how noble the task is, or how great the project is, or how much money the business makes. There's a statistic, or there was an article by Inc. magazine a few years ago that said 65% of people would take a new boss over a pay increase.
Wow.
That's a big deal, because you and I both know it doesn't matter how much money you make. If you're miserable because of the leader in your world, it doesn't matter. And money doesn't fix that. But when you're with a leader who's worth following, boy, that's a life changer. That makes your family well. I always say this thing, and I know it sounds kind of funny, and again, it goes back to my shallow thinking, but I've always said that if the spouses or the significant others of my employees like me, then I feel like I'm leading at a pretty good level. And the reason I say that is because if my team is going home, number one, they're going home. Like I spend more time encouraging people to go home and take time to rest than I do stay late and make sure that thing gets done. And there's times for both, right? But if the spouse if I'm not the center of their spouse's frustration, then that means I'm doing something okay. I'm creating some sort of environment that they feel like they're flourishing in. And when work's rough, who's usually the center of the frustration? The boss, whoever's the leader, whoever's the whatever. Like, oh, if they would just see this, if they just get this right, if they'd get rid of that person, if they'd fix the money, but if I can do enough of those things pretty good, and the spouses, when they see me, they're okay seeing me, then maybe I'm doing something all right.
Yeah, that's great. What would you say, Tyler, to that, that leader? We talked about, everybody has influence and everybody's a leader. What would you say to that, that burnt out pastor, that burnt out leader, that burnt out husband, just kind of doesn't have anything else left in the tank? I know you talked a lot about, making sure your people are getting rest.
Yeah. So the book, when I talk about Life-Giving Leader, it comes from this idea that we do at our events. The week of the event, we always pray specifically, Lord, would you let grace and life flow from our stage and not be required for our stage? In other words, we want it to flow one direction. And great leadership, life-giving leadership, there's a direction of flow from the leader to the people they've been entrusted with, or the people around them, or whatever. When you lead poorly, you tend to require it from other people. They have to give you something, whether that's their emotion or their passion or their time or their something physically or whatever. You're taking from them. You know what I mean? And to me, great leaders understand that there's a flow that needs to go the other direction, which is, now, if you don't let life flow from you consistently, there's gonna be a time. None of us are gonna ever do it where we don't require it from somebody. The question is, which way is it flowing most of the time, right? So I bring that up because if you don't have something to give, there's no way that's going to flow the right direction. Like, if I don't have life to give to the people around me, I'm up a creek, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I would say this. I'd say, number one, and I'm a fan. Last year I went to a thing called Onsite, which is a week-long kind of therapeutic retreat. They say it's got the amount of group therapy that you go through is the equivalent of a year in a week. And It was because I felt like some things that I grew up with, specifically around finances and the way what I grew up in financially, I realized they were sneaking up into my psyche in the way I think now. And I just wanted to go deal with it and figure it out and go, I don't want to keep tripping over that concept or that idea or, that pain, really. So I needed that to get refilled. And I would just say, you got to do whatever it takes. Do whatever it takes to figure out what's blocking the flow of life into you. What are the things? Is there bitterness in your heart? Are there relational problems? Is there something you haven't dealt with that is from 10, 20, or 2 days ago? We've got to, as leaders, be open, and we've got to allow the Spirit to move through us. What can't, if there's bitterness in our heart, if there's roots of frustration and anger, if there's we've got to deal with those things and get them out. So whether it's, in your church because of an elder board that's killing you, or if it's, at home. I remember hearing at the 10-year anniversary of Catalyst, Chuck Swindoll did a talk, and he talked about what he's learned in 50 years of ministry. And so it's these 10 things. But the third thing he said is that it's hardest at home. And he was like, it's hardest at home because you don't get applause at home, and you don't get this and that and the other at home. You got to be dad at home or mom at home or whatever. And greatest things I do here most of the time is make sure the grass gets cut and make sure the leaves get blown. Like those are like big accomplishments in the Reagin household. But that's okay. And so having realistic expectations of home and work and all those things is important. So I just think I really would just say, I don't care what it takes, figure out a way to get healthy And because you're not good for anybody if you're not. If you're completely burned out and empty, what's next is not good. So, yeah.
Tyler, do you feel like, because, and again, going big stage leaders, bigger, platform leaders,
right?
There's been this kind of this feel in the past of do it on your own, buckle down, don't show weakness. Do you feel like that trend is changing, where more leaders are hearing that message that you're even sharing, this idea of resting and taking care of yourself? Do you see that changing?
I hope so. I think, just take the last 5 years and you think about significant ministries that have lost their leader to moral failure or some other substance abuse, whatever it is. And I would bet if we could trace their story back, it comes from a place of burnout and a place of, and the other big thing is they have separated themselves, not every time, but almost, you almost can see it. They have separated themselves out from the people that can call them out. They have started becoming isolated and alienated. And, there is the old adage that leadership is lonely at the top. Well, it's only lonely at the top if you bring nobody with you. And it's lonely at the top. The only thing to me that is lonely about leadership is the weight of what you carry, because nobody else carries it. So, when you're going through a tough financial time as a business, if the buck stops with you, guess who feels it every night, every day? It's you. That's the weight. That is a lonely weight, but it doesn't mean you have to do it by yourself. And so I remember Craig Rochelle at one day used to say, I just remember thinking that if I built this church, but I didn't have any friends at the end of the day, why am I doing this? And so he's like, I want to make sure that I always bring my friends with me. And that I, but I have a lot of close friends who have kind of lost their ministry and their influence because of isolating them from themselves, from people who could speak into their life and call out when they're not healthy. So my prayer is, yes, I hope that, you bring in our theme this year has been fully alive, specifically around, we've got to be healthy, whole leaders. And oftentimes I don't care how great you preach. If your Monday through Friday's a hot mess, it's not matching, there's things that aren't going well, and people are watching that.
Yeah, that's good. Here at Men of Iron, we're very passionate about mentorship, and it's what we do. And you talked about leaders who have separated themselves from people who have called them out and held them accountable. Who are those individuals, those mentors in your life, Tyler, that have helped you become the leader you are today?
Yeah, so I would, and one of the things I always love this, Craig at our one days would always say to people who say, hey, I want to have a mentor, and he goes, well, who do you want to be mentored by? And they said, well, I don't know. He's like, well, if you want to be mentored by John Maxwell, then go read his books. If you want to be mentored by Lisa Turkhurst, then go read her books. There's a reality to learning from the people that you aspire to be around. The other thing, though, is you need relationships in your life that or maybe a season ahead who and so I tell a lot of young college students when I speak to them, I always talk about leaders or learners, and you got to learn how to ask great questions. I said, right now is the time to build your character. So why don't you pick one or two or three, like a coach, and then somebody you admire right now, and say, hey, I would like to take you to lunch or coffee. You pay in terms of the one that's asking, and then be really responsible with the time. Have your questions and a journal, and say, here's the 3 questions that I've been thinking about that I'd like to ask you about. And then when the time's up, close up your journal and say, thank you for the time. And what you'll watch is that person will see how respectful you were and how helpful it seemed to them. I bet they would do it again. And you never know what kind of that relationship turns into. So I say all that to say, I worked with Andy for over a decade, Andy Stanley, and to get to sit under his leadership in a lot of meetings where, it really is just him processing leadership every week. And I wouldn't say we were in this personal one-on-one relationship mentoring thing, but I would say no question Andy has been a mentor in my life when it comes to leadership. Craig Rochelle has been a mentor in my life. Lisa Turkhurst is a really close friend, and I watch the way she leads, and she's one of the best leaders I know. And so I see that, and again, it's not her going, hey, let me mentor you. It's not, because we're kind of peers and friends.
Right.
But what it is we both have different things that we're offering each other in friendship that allows us to grow because we've learned from someone else. So those two, but throughout my life, like when I was in high school, right after I became a believer, my technology education teacher in the public school poured his life into me as a believer. And that his name's Coach Vandervelde. he's still teaching 35 years, of public school, but
That's awesome.
he poured into me. My granddad early on, Tom Tanner, who was the Wesley Foundation campus pastor, just a few men specifically that really invested in me and started speaking life into me, bringing color out in places that were probably, gray or black and white. And so I'm crazy grateful for that. And I just made a kind of a rule, and that if a young leader ever asked me for a phone call or a lunch or whatever, I try to do it if I can, because to me, that's just an important part of this discipleship journey.
That's awesome. So if Justin and I are ever in the Atlanta area, we'll call you for
Come
lunch.
on over. I'm serious. I love it.
Love it, man. You guys, you talked about doing this for 20 years. And how long have you been with Catalyst?
I've been there 7.
7 years. How do you see, just in those 7 years and even in the 20 years altogether, how do you see Catalyst creating change in the culture?
That's a good question. We've always said that we are a community of change makers. We learned from Andy that you fall in love with the mission and not the model. And for us, we have always been, I would say, quite theologically conservative. But when it comes to model and program, it is as progressive as we can think about, because we're just going, hey, and Craig's always said this, to reach people nobody's reaching, you got to do things nobody's doing. And that's a big deal. Like if that's not working anymore, we got to pivot. And so I think Catalyst is always trying to do that. And to be honest, we've been praying about what are the new wineskins for Catalyst. It's 20 years in. Does the big events at the arena work, or do we need to adjust that? What does this look like? This year, we usually do a bunch of one-day events and then our 2 big events, West and East. But all we're going to focus on this year, with it being the 20-year anniversary, is West Coast and about 10 weeks in Orange County, and then Atlanta for the 20-year anniversary, the first week of October. And we're just giving it everything we have to go, what are the new wineskins? What are we going to cast? What anchor are we throwing in the next 10 years that we want to present at Catalyst Atlanta? So it's a constant thing. You're constantly going, okay, what is that next speaker? Who's that next voice? Who's that next band? Who's that next idea? But at the end of the day, what's great about it is it all comes back to the same thing, which is God's word and the Holy Spirit, and allowing God to speak to us. And so what we want to do, or what we strive to do, is provide space for our Heavenly Father to meet with these leaders. That's what we want to do, and hopefully a space where they get better for Monday. And so I think if you stay with those simple things, how we do that doesn't really matter. It just matters that we are constantly praying for innovation from heaven, not from innovation from man.
That's good.
That's awesome. Well, Tyler, man, that's our 30 minutes. We appreciate your time, and it's an honor to have you on the podcast. We're big fans of Catalyst here at Men of Iron, and we just love what you guys are doing. You guys are, like you said, you guys are making some incredible change in the church and in the culture, and it's fun to watch.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thanks, Tyler. Well, J-Dub, Ohio launched this Saturday at the One Center in Canton, Ohio. What do you think, man?
We're doing it.
Yeah, we're doing it.
It's going to be good.
Saturday, February 2nd, Mentor and Protege Training for Northeast Ohio. So we're excited to be out there with our State Director, BZ. BZ holding it down in the Ohio area.
I think the heat will be on inside for the morning, probably.
Yeah,
it's going to be a little cold.
I saw the high for today in Canton, Ohio was like 1 degree. So
yeah.
Hopefully it warms up by then.
It is winter, folks. It is winter.
Man, well, thanks for tuning in to episode 23. For more info on Men of Iron, go to menofiron.org. You can find the Men of Iron podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Video version will be up on our Facebook and YouTube page. Thank you to Tyler Reagin again for being on the show. You can go to catalystleader.com to find out more info for resources and, of course, their big events of the year. Thank you to our today's sponsor, the One Center for Leadership. Talk to you guys later. We're out.
Peace.